September 24th, 2025. We got some nice heavy rains overnight last night and through today, and that's really helping this rye get rocking and going. Things are greening up again very nicely since the rain, and we haven't even been 24 hours since it started raining, so that's nice. The clover cover crop and the rye that's emerging in that are also greening up very nicely, and things are looking good. We have another heavy rain line inbound here in a few minutes. I wanted to stop up now that the concrete posts are all, or the fence posts are all set in concrete. I wanted to stop up and have a look. Here we are, up the fence area. And like I said, we got a ton of rain last night into today, through most of the day today. It stopped a few hours ago, but good moisture. We can see that here where the water has been puddling around the fence posts. And I kind of knew that concrete likes to be kept damp for a nice slow cure, which gives you a stronger, harder cure. But I did a little bit more in-depth reading last night on it, and it looks like ideally you want about 28 days for it to set to full hardness. And they say it gets about 80% hardness in about 7 days, depending on temperature, moisture, etc. But one of the really key things about curing concrete nicely, and I know this from a guy I knew who used to pour floors and pour foundations, was if you keep it wet, it doesn't crack, it cures a little bit slower, dries a little bit slower, and that gives you a much harder, nicer finish on concrete. So very much like planting a cover crop, planting concrete posts, even though they're not going to grow, kind of the same concept. You want to get them in before the rain, get your concrete set, and then if it stays wet like this, and it will now with all the rain we've had, and we've got more coming, it'll get a nice slow cure with plenty of moisture available. So we should be setting about as hard a concrete and as robust a concrete as we can set, given that we didn't pre-mix it, we didn't use a super high strength concrete, etc., etc. For comparison, the concrete that I used here, most of it is rated at about 4,000 psi, and like concrete for a distribution box or like a septic tank or something like that, precast, they're usually rated around 5,000 psi.
I suppose I'll just show you an example quick. See, concrete minimum strength, 5,000 psi at 28 days. So they also use the 28-day concrete cure, and septic tanks are made of it. 5,000 psi is a stronger density, so it's able to withstand more pressure.
Those would be a little bit harder concrete. But again, we're just holding up a fence post. The major load we would have would be if something tried to push on the fence, or in the event that we say had bees inside of this area and a bear was trying to get in, they might lean on the fence. So that's why we want everything set plumb and in concrete and robust, so that it would be very difficult for a bear to push it over. And then in the case of electrical fencing, one thing I found is if you have electric fencing up and you come into that area suddenly and scare the deer and they take off running, they may not necessarily remember that there's an electric fence in a given direction. And I've heard deer run into electric fence at probably 30 or 40 miles an hour, and you hear the whole fence rack and you hear all the fence posts rack. And I've actually had them wipe out T-posts before on that. Obviously it was not my intent to make them run into the fence, but when they spook and take off, they can hit it hard. This fence I don't think will have that problem because this fence will be pretty visible. But yeah, just some key points to consider. I guess we'll just take a look at the water situation here again. And you can see where our ground is hard here and the rain's running off on top and the ground is packed underneath. That water is just sitting there. And yet again, on the other side of the fence where we have cover crop and we've aggregated the soil a little bit, we've done a little mechanical tillage, and the big thing is we've got biology and nutrients and root structure in there, breaking that soil up and giving it an aggregate structure that allows for drainage. So again, very clear difference between the two, and within 3 feet of each other. It's nice to see our clover I know it's been here in the dry weather and struggling its way along, but it hasn't been super obvious with how dry it's been. It's nice to see after the rain, to see it just fill out and take off and respond. And it actually is pretty well established here. It just looked weak. So I just figured I would catch this window between the rain lines, get a look at things. We can see how much water has flowed down through here and on out into our cropping area. And if you recall the other day, only a couple days ago, that I was shooting some of these shots of the honeybees working this holy basil. And the holy basil was kind of in rough shape, very yellowed out, very dry and kind of starving from moisture. And now it's exploded out between the foliar feed and the rain. We've got honeybees in here everywhere. I also want to point out how uniform that reaction is. Again, we're not even 24 hours since the rain event, and immediately, with all the available nutrient in these plants, as soon as they had the moisture, they've exploded into a purple blanket of flowers. And that's here in front of the hives, and all the way down all of these strips, wherever there's any holy basil. And we can see right now it's loaded with honeybees and bumblebees and all sorts of tiny little pollinators as well. So that's very rewarding, and that'll help really push us out toward the honeybee hives here. Ooh, we got a white-faced hornet on that one, right on the entrance. It keeps trying to get in the entrance there. It looks like the guards are denying that. Or maybe he's waiting to scat behind the entrance. Another good feedback that we got those entrance restrictors on. None too soon. And it's really nice to see so many foragers returning, despite it's rained most of the day today. But it looks like in this little window between the rain lines, they're out and getting as much done as they can. So the guards are kind of blocking him. If I could get a little closer without upsetting the colony, I'd go in there and crush him myself with my fingers. Very special place in my heart for bald-faced hornets. Got stung on the nose when I was 9 by surprise. And man, that was probably one of the worst bee stings I've ever had. I've been stung by lots of wasps and hornets and honeybees and all kinds of creatures. But that one really hurt, and it was right on the nose. And I've never forgiven the white-faced hornets for that. Thought we would just take a look at the cover crop over this way, just so you can see how much it's greening up in here as well. It's really amazing what just a little touch of rain will do. And not nearly as much response if all the nutrients that those plants need aren't directly available. But fortunately in our case, the foliar feeds and soil work and nutrition we put down are there and have stayed there and have been waiting basically in queue for the plants to have enough water to use them. And you can see as soon as they do an explosion of growth, we have nice dark green leaf color We have nice, large, robust clover leaf sizes. We have an immediate explosion of flowers in the holy basil, universally across the board. And not just an explosion in flowers, but an explosion in flowers that have high enough nectar and pollen content for the bees to go after it immediately, and even to prefer it. And if you know anything about honeybees, I don't know about some of these other bees, but now honeybees can detect whether or not a flower has nectar or pollen in it by its charge. They can actually feel it in the fur. If you look closely on a honeybee, they have like sort of a fur, and they can actually feel whether or not that flower has pollen or nectar in it just by its charge. But even more than that, a honeybee will not visit a flower that is 7 bricks or lower. It must be 8 bricks or higher, or they won't even look at it. They won't even bother with it. So it could even have nectar and pollen on it, but if it's not of high enough quality, they won't go after it. And I don't know what our bricks rating is in here. I could actually probably take a plant sap sample of that and test it. Maybe we'll do that in an upcoming video. But I can assure you that it's much higher than 7 bricks, because the honeybees are in here and they're preferring the nectar and pollen in here. If you recall, and I say this quite frequently in my videos, environment dictates gene expression. And what does that mean exactly? Well, that means you can take any gene and put it in an environment, and if that environment is not favorable to the genetics, then those genetics won't do well. And if that environment is favorable, then they will do well. And by environment, I mean everything: temperature, humidity, soil health, nutrition available, trace minerals, macro minerals, biology. We can go on and on and on about all the factors that affect it. But that's the tool that we have. We can't change the genetics we're starting with. You know, we can try to get better seed, but at a point, you can only get seed that is so good. And you have to let that seed grow and evolve in an environment. So the best thing you can do is make it the best environment for that seed. And that's what we're trying to do here on this farm using regenerative agriculture. And you're going to see that evolve. If you haven't already noticed that evolving, you're going to see that evolve very rapidly in the next few years here. We can see the same thing in the drainage here, all around in this trench, where we trenched out to run the fence, and then we cut holes to pour the concrete and set posts. You can see where the water has run in here and into the trench and run across, and you can see the silting and sediment in the lower part of this trench from it, and even on the concrete. And you can see it runs across like to this center point. That next rain line is just about upon us, I think. Winds are picking up, starting to sprinkle a little heavier, and it won't be long before we have a look-see at our turkey friends here. Looks like they know enough to come in out of the rain. Interesting how much more curious and aware and intelligent turkeys seem to be in comparison to chickens. September 27th, 2025. Just up to the farm to have another inspection on the beehives. I was thinking about even pulling honey off today, but I really want to get a look in there and assess resources and all. So we're going to have a look-see, and then if time provides this weekend, I'll pull honey. Looking at the forecast, it looks like we have some time, another week or so. Still should be nice weather for that. So I may wait till next weekend or sometime during the week, depending on how schedules and things align. Just thought we'd have a look at the cover crops in here and see how much the winter rye has grown. That's like 8 to 10 inches tall now and developing well. We had good rain the last couple days. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And I know we got at least 2 inches of rain. And man, does it ever show in these cover crops. Look how robust and green and dense things are growing in here. That's really nice to see. And everything is looking good. And I know it's a little sparser in spots in here, but I do see the winter rye popping up through along with the clover. We'll take a little further walk out into the sunlight range. So here we go. Out where we get better sunlight. And the clover has really jumped up and taken off with the rain and the previous foliar feeds that help support it nutritionally. And additionally, I know I just spotted some giant radishes sticking up out of the ground over here. Yeah. Yeah, man. Look at that thing. Holy cow. And this one too. Monsters. So our cover cropping plan is working well and in the process of transitioning to a winter cover crop as we approach the frost and freeze. Let's go have a look up top and jump into the honeybee hives and have a look. All right, here we are up the halfway fenced area. The green is really exploding in here. Look how thick and dense this cover crop has become. And you can really see it in a couple of areas where the burn piles were and also where the water channels down the most. But quite impressive and beautiful. And I spoke with my friend Joe last night, and he and his wife found a nice supply of seed garlic for us. So I guess we're going to do about another 100 bulbs of that, which would give us somewhere between 400 and 600 cloves. So an additional 400 to 600 plants over the 150 we put in already. And I know I got to get back here this weekend and weed around that existing garlic there and mulch it down. It's starting to have competition from the cover crop, but so it's time to tip the balance in its favor. And just looking at these fence posts where we poured our concrete, you can't even see the concrete in here. All that water that ran down the trench silted over on top of the concrete. So that's good. We're keeping excellent moisture for a nice, slow, steady cure for the concrete. And let's see, I think I poured most of this on Monday and the last few posts up that way on Tuesday. So 9/22 to 9/27, we're 5 days out. So we're not quite at the 80% cure point yet. That'll be 7 days. I did want to get a look at this from this corner here. I noticed yesterday or the day before when I was here in the rain, just how large and robust these purple top turnips are growing. And there's an Austrian winter pea mixed in, but but we are actually developing turnips now. If I can get a shot here with the camera. So that's pretty exciting. And these have really blown up, especially down in this corner for some reason. We had a couple of spots here that aren't quite as robust. I think some of that is a result of some of the burn piles and all the ash that was there. The potassium would change the pH of the soil and probably give us an excess potassium level. So I think as the winter goes on, the cover crops work the soil and things wash out a bit, we'll see that pick up fairly nicely. And again, we'll be back in here next spring to disc it or do some additional tillage management, probably both in order to plant it and in order to remix that soil and blend the cover crop back in. Well, good Lord, isn't that a beautiful sight? With the rains we had and the foliar feeds we gave, the holy basil has exploded into flower again. And it's loaded with honeybees. So much so that you can hear it from 20 or 30 feet away. You hear the buzz. Man, that's a wonderful, soothing sound. Well, the Ford 9N has been down for a couple of weeks. I had to get a new tube in. And it took me some time to get that done with all the other things that were going on in the works. But I did finally get the tube in, and today after I did the hive inspection on the honeybees, I went back and had a coffee break and mounted the tire up with the new tube on it. And looks solid. Just ran it around the farm a good bit to make sure it was good. So here we are, end of the day, end of the week, and we got a new smoker. We got in and inspected honeybee hives. We can expect 2 full boxes of honey off of those and build in reserves for next year. Our cover crops are growing really well. We've had good rains. They've had good foliar feeds. They had good inoculants at planting. Our fence posts are set in concrete and curing. And the Ford 9N is back functional again. Just only 10 or 20,000 more projects to go, and things will be fully functional here. So next I got to pick up some steel wire to help rung up the new fence line that's going up, and then we'll go from there. So Tuesday, September 30th, Sunday or Monday? I don't even know what day it was. I think it was yesterday, Monday. I came through with the brush hog and just took the buckwheat a little bit lower to let a little bit more sunlight into our cover crop. And you can see how nicely things are greening up in that under canopy. Our winter rye is coming up. Our clovers are holding it down. And so today marks 9 years since I started this YouTube channel. And I had another channel by a similar name that got canceled years back. But in 2016, I decided to take it a little more seriously. And so here we are 9 years later. I don't know. It's been a fun ride so far. And I guess we'll keep it going. Switch gears. And yesterday evening, as the light was fading, I came up here and just tried unrolling one of these sections of fence. That actually went really smooth and doesn't have nearly as much memory as I was expecting it to have. Memories where it kind of like curls back up like it was in the roll still. Not bad at all. And so I went over to Tractor Supply. I figured I'd use the dark time to get some errands done. And I picked up a half-mile roll of electric fence wire, just a string across the top for it to attach to, and then to run. Electric fence runs the rest of the way up probably. Because as I do the math on the electric fence cost versus the cost of more vinyl coated chicken wire mesh, and that versus the need for that above 4 feet or so, it just doesn't really pay. So electric fence is a lot cheaper to do, so I think that's what we're going to do. Just got back from the honeybee inspection and just mounted up the other tire for the Ford 9N. Finally got the tube in for that. I'm sitting here just enjoying the afternoon and noticing and admiring the honeybee activity out here in the aster. And then realizing, the landlord hasn't mowed this lawn in a couple of months. And I think most people would probably be upset by that. But for me, it's like we're working with the natural ecosystem. And look at the resources we've provided for honeybees and other wild pollinators. Just looking at one plant that popped up when you gave it a little bit more time. It doesn't seem like a lot, but if everybody does this in the yard, it adds up to a whole lot of acreage of wildflowers available to wild pollinators. And let's not forget that those are part of the bottom of the food chain. If we don't have them, we lose all them, we lose all us.